Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Sonia Siddiqui, and joining us today is Anubhav Razdan. Hi, Anubhav.
Hi, Sonia. Hello, everyone.
All right, so I'm going to let Anubhav get into his really interesting topic. He's going to be talking about how to make sense out of coffee chats, how to even get to that point, and what to talk about once you're there. So before I hand it over to him, I just want to make sure that everyone is connected properly. So I know everyone's slowly logging in now. Just so you all know, you are all on listen only mode. We will not be able to hear you, but Anubhav will be taking your questions towards the end of the webinar. So there will be a Q&A session. And for your answers to be, for your questions to be taken, please type them into the Q&A tab. Any questions typed into the chat will not be looked at. We're doing Q&A in the Q&A session. And for test results, please use a laptop or desktop computer. If you're using mobile devices such as your cell phones or tablets, we will probably not get the full effect of the webinar. And just to tell you a little bit about ACCES, we've been around for over 30 years helping job seekers such as yourselves. We have over 30 programs tailored to sector-specific programs, or we've got programs for youth, programs for women, leadership, entrepreneurship. So if you want to know more, check out our website and everything should be there. We've got 6 locations in the GTA, with our newest 7th location opening up in Newmarket. So if you're anywhere close to there, stay tuned. There will be another location opening up soon. And we've got 3 national programs and online services, such as the webinars we bring to you, and online job fairs and virtual open houses as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Anubhav now, and we'll get right into it.
Okay. Thank you, Sonia. I am just so logistically, it's a little bit easier. I'm just going to turn off my video, and I promise I will turn it back on by the end of it, because, of course, part of the reason for you guys coming to this webinar is to be able to see my face. So let's begin. Okay. So in case there is any trouble with audio or you guys can't hear me, please just point it out to Sonia in the chat window, and we can take it from there. The idea here essentially is for me to share some of my story and share about my experience as someone who moved to Canada not too long ago, and just see if any of that makes sense for you guys. So without any further ado, let's dive in. So this is the agenda I have in front of me, and the agenda I prepared for today. So as you can see, we're going to talk about overall why are coffee chats important. Not so sure how many of you have had interactions which can be classified as coffee chats before, or if you are even aware of what a coffee chat is. At least when I first came into this country, I didn't know at all what a coffee chat was. I essentially only drank coffee for pleasure. So we'll talk about that, the concept of coffee chats in a broad term first. Then I'm going to share through my experiences how I learned to do one coffee chat well. And I don't know how many of you are math aficionados, how many of you are aware of this or remember. I think all of us were taught unitary method across the world in primary school, which essentially talks about solving a problem with one unit and then seeing how that scales across multiple units. So I'm going to adopt a little bit from math here today. I'm going to talk about how I learned to do one effective coffee chat. So essentially, how did I know who to reach out to? Where did I find those people? How did I know what to talk to them about? And how did I follow up on that conversation and on that interaction? So once we're done with that, we're going to talk about, I'm going to share some ideas on how you could do 100 effective coffee chats. Now, will you need to do 100 coffee chats? Maybe, maybe not, but I think that's a nice round number to just like talk about. And obviously, I'm going to share some ideas, some things that I know that work, some things that didn't work with me, and then you guys take that into account, and then finish it off with questions that you guys may have had. So obviously, want to leave enough time for questions. I think we're expecting about 10 to 15 minutes left for questions, and that will be towards the end. So before we begin, I strongly recommend you grab preferably a notepad and a pen, so that you can write down your thoughts, so that you can ask questions at the end. If you can't manage a notepad or a pen, try and take notes either on your laptop or your phone, however you might be joining us today. And I strongly recommend that, because this, unlike watching Netflix or YouTube, you will not get good value out of this about 45 minutes that we have, unless you take notes. So let's take a 5-second pause, and everyone can go grab a notebook or even start taking notes on their phone. Okay. I hope everyone has the right tool that they need to just capture their thoughts as we are talking today. Before I get into the meat and potatoes of today, I want to give you a disclaimer. And this is sort of like the little disclaimer you see when you see advertising for financial products or insurance, where they say investments are subject to market risk. Please read the offer document carefully before investing. This isn't really that. This is a little bit more about the fact that these are my experiences. They may or may not apply to you, to be honest. Like, I saw success and I saw failure from trying the things that I'm going to share. Take that with a pinch of salt, to be honest. My story and my experience and what I do today may or may not be what your story, what your experience, and what you want to do in the future is. These are things that worked for me. They are essentially ideas, and these are essentially thoughts for you. And since you and I are different people with very different, probably, backgrounds, skills, future aspirations, like I said, please take whatever I say today with a grain of salt and not as a must do. Like, this is not a formula that I'm laying out today. I'm sharing ideas with you. Try these ideas, see what works, discard what doesn't work, and then go on and double down on what is working. At the end of the day, this time is going to only be effective if you listen to what I'm saying, understand your own reality and the reality that you're aspiring to as you start your journey in Canada, and apply maybe just one small idea that you hear about today. And if that idea works, double down on it. I strongly recommend, I'm in general an advocate for applying your strengths rather than focusing on your weaknesses. So apply whatever is working, apply it to multiple different places and situations, and see the kind of results you get. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's begin. So first of all, who am I? Good question, I think, to ask in the beginning, because you've obviously taken out this time on a Wednesday, and so have I. So I think it's important to do an introduction to begin with. So to give you background, I was born and raised in India. I lived in India till I was about 25 years of age. And then after that, I spent time abroad, and I've now been in Canada, like I said, for over 3 years now. So during university is when I actually began my professional career. I started volunteering with a global nonprofit, and I loved the work that I was doing so much. I was essentially doing fundraising and sponsorships, and increasingly a lot of sponsorship sales for them. I loved that work so much that I joined them full time. And I spent about 6 years growing through that organization and taking on different roles, increasing responsibility, traveling around the world, which is, I think, one of the things that I really liked. I had the opportunity to travel to more than 30 countries during my time with them. And that was the first phase, as I call it, of my life. But after about 6 years there, I was at a situation where I was done growing, and I had to decide what's next for me in my professional journey, in my professional growth, right? And at that time is when I discovered my love for technology, and I discovered my love for bringing technology to new people and to new realities. So since close to about 5 years now, I've been working in the technology sector. I work with businesses, so typically medium to large sized businesses, and I help them bring in technology to ease the way they do business. So to make life simpler for their teams, their people. In my current role, I work with a startup downtown in downtown Toronto. I'm selling software, and I'm bringing in software to construction companies, to mid-sized and large-sized construction companies. So that's on the professional side of things. In my spare time, I really enjoy watching movies. I really enjoy trying out and eating new foods, and I also really enjoy spending time with my dog. One thing that you must know about me at present is I really love what I do. I really love, obviously, I really love the general function that I'm in, so technology sales. And I also really love the company that I work for. One of the big reasons for that is the fact that on days like today, I don't know how many of you, or if any of you are already in Toronto, but it's a really bad day with a lot of snow. And my job and the kind of work that I do gives me the flexibility to be able to work from home on days like this. And I can be anywhere in the world, but still be able to do my job. And I really like that flexibility that I get. So that was a little bit about me. I think now it's critical that we get into a very important question. So why are coffee chats important? Sonia, if you could just go next. Yeah. So why are coffee chats important, and what's the reason that we're literally doing a webinar about it? And maybe a couple of hundred people are tuned into that webinar. Coffee chats, at least in my experience, is a very uniquely Western phenomena. When I say Western phenomena, I mean in the West, like the Western part of the world. So a lot of Western Europe and North America. Having spent time in other parts of the world, this is not something that I've seen in other places. And I've spent time in Africa, I've spent time in Southeast Asia, I've spent time in Europe, I've spent time in India, of course, and now have spent time in North America. Coffee chats aren't that much of a big deal, except for the Western part of the globe. Now, when I first, like I covered a little bit earlier, when I first came in, a lot of the people that I met, or like friends of friends, or like long distance family, right? They told me that you have to do a lot of coffee chats. Like if you want to find a job. And for the first few months that I moved here, I decided to take a little bit of a break, and I was like not doing professionally anything. I just was like taking a break for the first few months. But then 4 months after having been in Canada, I was like, okay, I need to start looking for a job. And when I first started looking, a lot of people gave me this advice that you have to talk to people and you have to do coffee chats. So I would go to those interactions or have those conversations with phone, either on the phone or through messaging or even in person. But then it took me a while to understand what exactly is a coffee chat. And that's when I discovered that coffee chat is essentially a way for you to talk to someone around sharing a beverage. So around, in this case, specifically coffee, and then be able to learn about their experience, their life, their work, and have that sort of an informational exchange with them. Questions that might be on top of your mind, and these were definitely things that I thought about. Does it have to be coffee, or can it be like another beverage? Maybe like, I don't know, green tea, or can it be a beer, or can it be something else? That's secondary to the fact that it's a reason, it's a highly targeted and it's a highly specific kind of meeting that you're doing with someone. It's semi-formal meeting where you're trying to understand their world, and you're trying to share about your world and what you're looking for. So that's the reason why they're important. And if you just move on to the next slide, I have some more pointers mentioned there. So specifically, the reason why you should care about coffee chats is rough statistics. About 80% of job offers in Canada typically result from networking. And the biggest way to network is through coffee chats. One-on-one interactions typically held over coffee, where you're learning about someone else and you're sharing about yourself. Coffee chats are critical if you want to build relationships. And these are not just relationships that you may have from before. These are relationships that you're trying to build from zero. So you're new to the country, or you're maybe new to the city and you don't know anyone here. One of the best ways that you can get out and start building those relationships is by asking people out to coffee. It's a way for you to learn about potential career paths and specific roles, right? So you can get an idea about general direction about people that people took in their career. Let's say you're meeting someone who's been working for about 30 years, 40 years, you ask them for coffee, you can get a sense of their career path. Or if you meet someone who's in a specific role that you'd also like to maybe be working in, you can talk to them about that specific role. It's also a great way to like learn about specific companies, right? People in general are open to sharing about what they know about company or the industry that they're working in, and they're very, in general, very welcoming of other people who are willing to learn. And this is a good way to do that. And at the same time, if everything goes well, by the end of those typical coffee chat interactions, you have the opportunity to get introduced to the right people. And these are just some of the reasons why it's important to do these coffee chats, and it's important to have these kind of interactions. Can we go next? Sonia, thank you. So my first point, and like I said, we're going to first talk about how to do one coffee chat well, and then we're going to apply that learning with some more tips to do, let's say, about 100 or even 500 or 50 or 20 coffee chats well. So the first thing you need to know before even you start reaching out to anyone is to clearly be able to say, what do you want to do? So let's pause there for like a second. You may be someone who's spent 5 years or 2 years or 1 year or 50 years doing something that you've done in the past. All of that has brought you to the current situation that you're in, right? Maybe in Canada, or maybe in your home country, or maybe in a third country. But what do you want to do in the future? You should clearly be able to have an answer to that question, because the answer to that question gets you to the next most important pointer, which is the right people to talk to and the right people to interact with in order to do what you want to do in the future. Very, very tactically, and I'm being very specific here, you need to be able to write your own dream job description. And of course, everyone, I think, has seen job descriptions on LinkedIn or on Indeed or on Monster or any of those job portals, or even on company-specific job sites. You should be able to write your own. And it doesn't have to be like 5 pages or anything like that. You should be able to write your job description, let's say 5 to 6 key big bullet points in terms of what your day-to-day or month-to-month or quarter-to-quarter is going to be in a job that you want to have in Canada. With that job description starts your next step, which is to identify people, right? And identify people that you want to be talking to. Now, how do you identify those people is something I'm going to cover. But that's, again, something that you want to be, that you want to only come to once you first clearly answer. So let's take my example. So I had spent some time doing fundraising and sponsorships for a nonprofit. And I had good success in it. I'd done well, I'd risen well in the company. I generally had a good, solid network. But then when I came to that point, this was about 5 years ago, like I said before, at that point, my question was, what do I want to do in the future? And when I say in the future, I don't mean like for the next 50 years, but at least for the next between 2 to 5 years, what do I want to do? And it's then that I was able to write down this sort of like a job description of being able to, one, talk to companies who are interested in adopting technologies and learn about what their business processes are. Two, be able to look at what if I'm associated with the company, what sort of technology can we provide to them, and if that makes a difference or not. Three, be able to negotiate and be able to talk to those people, reach the right people, and be able to have conversations around adopting that technology. In that way, and I'm just giving you examples here as I speak, in that way, I was able to write down my ideal job description. And once I had that job description, I started reaching out to people who were doing either the kind of job that I wanted to do, or who had done that job well in the past. And that's where I figured out the right people who I had to be talking to if I wanted to do what I wanted to do in the future. So first step, figure out what do you want to do and be able to write it down in 3 to 4 bullet points. And basis that, you will start finding out those people, right? One thing that you should keep in mind always is it's in some cases easier to have a list of company where these sort of like the job description that you've written down for yourself, the kind of work that you want to do, match that to the kind of companies who might have those sort of like job descriptions available. And then that makes it easier for you to find those people. So an activity for you may be to list down 50 companies who have the kind of responsibilities and who have the kind of people or job descriptions rather, not just openings. So openings come and go. Who are those companies who hire people who do the kind of work you want to do? That's the next critical question to answer. And with that, you move on to the next stage, which is now that you know what kind of work you want to do, and you have let's say a list of people that you want to, a list of companies rather that you want to be interacting with, where do you find people to talk to who might be at these companies or might be doing the kind of work you want to do? I have a number of ideas listed here. So on the left, on your left, when you're facing the screen, you will see very conventional, typical ideas. And on the right, you will find unconventional ideas. So typical, obviously, at least back in our home countries, I think everyone meets the most amount of people through family, friends. You're maybe meeting a friend, and they're like, oh, I have another friend coming, and that's how you meet this one new person, right? Maybe you have family friends, and those family friends introduce you to new people. That's how we typically meet new people, right? A lot of us meet new people because we're in school, or we have someone who's teaching us, faculty, staff who are in school. When I say school, I also mean like college or university, and we meet new people that way. We also might just meet people at alumni get-together. So maybe alumni of the university or college that we went to, or high school that we went to, as well as past and present co-workers. We meet new people that way. Neighbors are a lot of ways, especially if you're coming to a new country, you will have a set of new neighbors. So make sure you're like aware that there are new people who might be just living next to you or might be sharing a wall with you. LinkedIn contacts are one way in which it's very easy to meet new people. And I don't know about you, but till a few years ago, I used to get like connection requests on LinkedIn, and I would just add them. I'd just accept those people on LinkedIn. And when I moved to Canada a couple of years ago, I went through my LinkedIn contacts and I thought about whether it makes sense to like reach out to these people, because it's sort of like, I don't know if this is true across, but at least with me, a couple of years ago, when LinkedIn was new, or even like Facebook was new, this is maybe going a little too back for some of you, but it was very common for people to randomly send out friend requests or connection requests on LinkedIn. And other people would accept those, saying that, okay, I'm on LinkedIn, I want to network, so let's accept. Now that you need to meet new people, it may make sense to like go back to LinkedIn or even Facebook and see if it makes sense to be talking to those people. Another thing to keep in mind, another way to meet new people is through the sports that you might be playing. I personally play soccer every now and then, and that was a good way for me to meet like a couple of interesting people who gave me a lot of tips and ideas about what to do and how to approach the situation. Related, if you're into gymming, the person next to you on the treadmill might be an interesting person to talk to about just about yourself and what you want to do, right? And I'm going to cover that as well. What do you want to do? I've already covered, but talk about yourself is something I'll cover. People, if you're a religious person and you visit the church or the temple or the mosque or any other form of any other place of religion, it might be helpful to like talk to those people about specific opportunities and about specific coffee chats. And you can find people to coffee chat with at the temple as well. I have in fact done 3 coffee chats with people who I met with at a gurudwara. I don't know if everyone's aware, but it's essentially a place of worship for people of the Sikh religion. And I visit like a number of different religious institutions. So I was at a gurudwara, I saw someone, we got talking, and that conversation led to a coffee chat. And that's happened like 3 to 4 times for me. So the reason why I'm sharing all of these ideas is to get you started. And as you have the notepad in front of me, maybe take like a couple of seconds and just write down other interesting places or unusual places where you could find people who might be interested in talking to you. It's critical that you spend the time to identify places to meet people because that's not something that a lot of people do. And it will help you do better as you're setting up and as you're going about setting up your new life in Canada. Again, just to revisit, there are ways to find people, conventional places to find people through friends, through colleagues, through past colleagues, through people you used to be friends with but are not anymore friends. So maybe reach out to them again and be like, hey, do you know anyone who would be helpful for me to talk to? And these are some of those ideas again. Can we go next, please? So now that you have a list of places where you can find people, and you've probably thought of like new ideas of like talking to people, new ideas for places where you can find these people. The biggest thing that you must do next is practice talking about yourself. And once you've done that, and once you're relatively satisfied, you must practice asking good questions. Because think of it this way. Think of the best conversation you had in the past, let's say in the past 1 week, the best conversation, and try to visualize that best conversation. And try to really like think about what was the highlight of that conversation. Was it a conversation in which someone was constantly talking at you and constantly telling you some sort of like long story which was not of very much interest to you? Or was it a conversation where there was a lot of back and forth that you had with that other person? So you said something, and then they said something, and then you said something in return, and they said something in return. Was it a conversation like that? Think about that ideal conversation, and you can really break down these conversations into a couple of different types and categories, and really the components of a good conversation. And the biggest component of a good conversation is that each party asks the other good questions. So once each party does like sort of like an introduction about themselves, and if you're meeting someone new, that's critical. After that, it's all about asking good questions, keeping in mind what the other party has already said. So let's break this down further. So how do you practice talking about yourself? Let me give you an example. So I'm going to do an introduction of myself now, which I think is a bad example. And then we're gonna like go over it again. So here I begin. Hi, I'm Anubhav. I'm looking for technology sales role. I have 5 years of experience and I studied business in university. In my last role, I was at the largest technology company in Canada doing sales for US and Canada. Before that, I was at company X, where I was leading a team of 5 people. And those 5 people were very interesting people because they really liked me as a supervisor. And I made sure that they were always paid on time. And I made sure that all of my clients were happy. And I also, a lot of times, will go out and take my clients out for dinner so that we could do more business. We sold to insurance companies, and a lot of those insurance companies were interested in doing business with us. Before that, I was at another technology company where we sold software to hospitality companies. All of our clients really liked us, and all of our clients really liked me. Do you have a job that I can apply for? And cut. So that is an example of how some conversations have actually happened where I've been a part of. And I have done some of this when I was really bad at it, when I was having maybe really a bad day. Other people have said something similar to me when introducing themselves. And this is just to illustrate what one bad example of talking about yourself can look like. Now, this isn't as much about the words. It's not just about your English speaking skills, and this is something that we should be aware of. In general, I think people are accepting, even if you're not the most fluent English speaker. People are comfortable, people are accepting, and that's not the biggest problem here. The problem here is that it's difficult to follow, and it's difficult to remember any logical flow of this introduction, because it's all over the place. Some key things that you must keep in mind whenever you're talking to another person, and for some folks this might not be any new thing, but any new idea, but a lot of times the audience is more important than what you're trying to say to them. So if you're talking to someone, it's more important what they care about and what they want to listen, rather than what you have to say to them. Because if you can understand what they care about and what they want to listen, you can tailor your message to them. So that was a bad example, where I went on and on for about like a minute and a half, for about a minute and a half, just about myself, said random things, no logical flow. I basically did not take a pause anywhere. I was just doing a general sort of like introduction. And what does a good introduction look like? So key things to keep in mind: keep it 10 seconds or lesser. This is really about just getting their attention. It's not about you telling them your entire career history and your entire resume, or like all of your background. This is only about giving them one piece of information that will get their attention, and you build on that. It's also about, like I said, short. It's also about giving them an opportunity to ask questions, giving them an opportunity to talk about themselves, or ask questions about your background. And it's just a beginning. So if I were to meet someone else who works in technology, general technology area, or if I'm to meet with someone else at a party or in the gym, I have to do a professional introduction. This is what I would say. Hi, my name is Anubhav, and I currently work with a technology startup in downtown Toronto. In my current role, I work with construction teams, with operations teams at construction companies, and I help them save on time and money by adopting technology. And cut. That's it. This is literally 5 seconds or maybe 10 seconds of just a very basic introduction about what I'm doing currently. After this introduction, they have the opportunity to ask me more. So what can they ask me? Oh, hey, you work in technology. I also work in technology. Or maybe I have heard of technology startups. Another thing they could ask, you work in downtown Toronto, and I'm talking to someone in Toronto, right? I also work in downtown. Where exactly do you work? Another thing that they can ask, or like continue the conversation with, you work with operations team? I also work with operations teams. Or I don't work with operations team. I'm a part of an operations team. Construction? I've heard of construction, or I bought a house that was recently constructed. The idea being, I'm giving them an opportunity to ask me more questions. At the same time, I'm keeping it short, because it's not about how long you can talk. It's not a competition to see who can talk longer. It's a competition to see how much you can keep the conversation going, and back and forth. How much of that back and forth can you have? And it's about that sort of a relationship and that sort of a conversation to happen. What else? The fact that I gave them, I stopped when I was just about 5 to 10 seconds in, and the fact that I gave them some critical pieces of information about myself will help begin this conversation, right? And the next part is about asking questions. So before you meet with anyone, it's critical that you look them up. I cannot begin to tell you how many people I've met with where either I haven't looked up that person, and it's a simple Google search that can give you like either the LinkedIn profile, or can give you their different, like maybe a article that was written about them, or they wrote an article, or any of the other different pieces of information, but read through it so that you have a rough idea about who you're meeting, right? You should typically know at least their company, especially because you're doing a coffee chat with them for professional reasons. You should know typically their company, what they do roughly, broad idea at that company, typically how long have they been in that role, and that sort of a background information, right? I have been in situations where someone has come in and they ask me, so what do you do? Now, a coffee chat like that is obviously not a good example, right? Like, imagine, put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're meeting with. That person, when asked a question like, so what do you do, will think, if you don't know what do I do, then why did you come to meet me? And that's not the sort of impression you want to give to anyone that you're meeting for a coffee chat, right? So really know who you're meeting. And once you know that, once you begin, and it's really like well begun is about like 30% of the job done at a coffee chat. So when you know who you're meeting and you can tailor your introduction and what you want to say to the person that you're meeting, to the audience that you have in front of you, you're done with about 50% of a good coffee chat. So know who you're meeting, practice talking about yourself before and after you know who you're meeting, and practice asking good questions. So there are 3 types of questions that you can ask, and any question in the world is either one of these 3. There are open-ended questions, there are clarifying questions, and then there are close-ended questions. So let me give you an example. Open-ended question is, hey, how's your day? Or another open-ended question is, hey, how are you doing? Or another open-ended question is, hey, how have you been? And I'm giving you very generic examples because these are the kind of questions you will ask in the beginning of the conversation. A clarifying question is in response to what someone has already said. So let's say you ask them, hey, how are you doing? They say, oh, not very well. I've not had a great day. Now is the time to ask a clarifying question. And this is how you continue that conversation and you have a good coffee chat, build on a good coffee chat. You ask them, why? What happened? And again, you see how there's an open-ended question, response, clarifying question, response, and then you go into, again, an open-ended question. So it's a little bit of a dance that you're doing here. Also, the third and final type of questions are the close-ended questions. So these are typically questions that can only be answered either yes, no, or I don't know. So let's say you ask someone, hey, do you know what time is it? It can only be answered with a specific answer. And it's a close-ended question. So if you ask someone, hey, you know what the time is? They say 7:30 p.m. And that's the end of the conversation, pretty much. Unless you ask them a new question or like a related question. So have a balance of these open-ended, clarifying, and close-ended questions. Typically, I like to have more open-ended questions in the beginning of a conversation and a coffee chat. Obviously, introducing clarifying questions where I don't understand something, and then have more close-ended questions to like bring our conversation to a close. I would suggest you have some questions prepared. So have a mix of like 2 to 3 open-ended questions that you want to ask, 2 to 3 advice-based or clarifying questions that you want to ask them. So specific, very targeted questions. And maybe have like 1 request that you want to make to them before you finish the coffee chat, if everything goes well, right? And again, this is a little bit scientific, but at the same time, it's also about you understanding how a conversation is going and you really tuning in and exhibiting and like really like managing and showcasing and using your people skills and conversational skills to the best extent. Keep a healthy balance, like I already said. That's important to know because in the past, like I've been in situations where like folks have had a lot of like in the beginning itself, they will ask close-ended questions. So like I said in my introduction, someone makes an introduction and they immediately ask you, is there an opportunity or a job at your company that you can refer me to? Now, what happens in a situation where I say, no, there is no job? Our coffee chat is over in that case. The conversation has pretty much like stalled or is like finished at that case. How do you then continue the conversation? it's not a good spot to be in, right? Of course. So remember to keep those close-ended questions towards the latter half of the conversation of the coffee chat, so that you know how to, so that you have more context and you've had an interaction and built some amount of rapport, and then you can get into those close-ended questions. Could we go next? Now, this is critical. So let's say you've done a really good coffee chat with a person, you really enjoyed the conversation, that person was doing a job that you would really like to do, and it's been great. How do you follow up? And if you follow up, and the reason why this is important is because most people don't follow up, like majority. If you follow up well, you will already have done better than 90% of the people who do any kind of coffee chat. So let's look at the numbers here, right? Very few people have the confidence to ask for coffee chats. People who do tend to usually have not very good conversations, or not very good questions, or not very good sort of like interactions. Even fewer of those people who manage to have good interactions follow up. If you can do these three things well, you're 95 or even 99% doing better than 99% of the folks out there. So how do you do a follow-up? And I have a very specific and tactical example here that I've put in. It's literally divided into 3 paragraphs. So first is thanking them. Obviously, someone else has taken out time from their day or to meet with you for a coffee chat, and meet with you for an interaction, and they've spent time, energy, maybe money doing that. So you want to thank them first. You want to thank them specifically for something that they said in the conversation. So that makes them realize that you were paying attention. It wasn't just, you weren't just doing it just for the heck of doing it. You want to specifically, like I said, specifically call out what you really liked in the conversation. So in this case, I've written, I appreciated learning about how you've seen software selling evolve in the past 5 years, and your insights on how to adopt a solution-focused mindset. And this is obviously reference to the conversation that we had, right? And right at the end, and this is something you've already spoken to them about, ideally, the close-ended question, remember? One of the close-ended questions in this example, I asked them in person. Our conversation went well, and towards the end, I was like, would you be willing to guide me on who the right person would be to talk about specific opportunities at your company? And they said they agreed in person. So I'm capturing that again and asking them in case they would want to be kept in loop as my conversation progresses. And this is just a very specific example of how to follow up. Key things to keep in mind here: follow up typically within 24 hours, and don't wait for like a month to pass by after a coffee chat, or a week to pass by. It's good to follow up with like typically the next day, or even end of day if you met someone in the morning. Include something specific that you discussed in the conversation, in the coffee chat, and how that conversation was helpful to you. If they gave you specific advice, books or resources, mention that you were already, if they said you should really read this book, mention and actually do that. Get that book from the library and say that you got that book from the library or ordered it, or however it may be. If they offered to like make a reference or like make an introduction, do mention that in your note, and ask how you could how they could make that introduction, and how you could help. If the conversation, and this is the other end, if the conversation wasn't that great, and the conversation wasn't like, you couldn't immediately talk about like how you could help them or how they could be of help to you, do not ask for a favor. Do not be, if your conversation was, let's say your conversation was great, but you couldn't find a common way to like follow up, or a common, say a reference, or like even more information that you needed, part on good terms and say that it was really good good to be talking to them, and enjoyed the conversation. And you would like to be in touch, and then follow up with like a connection request on LinkedIn, or set a time to follow up in the future, or something like that. In case they mentioned something that, another thing that I haven't specifically highlighted in this example is in case they mentioned an area where they would like some help, or a problem, or like a solution or a challenge that they're facing at work or even otherwise. And if you think you can offer help there, very specific help there, remind them that you can offer help there. So let's say someone says, oh, I've really been like trying to, let's say, for example, really been trying to learn Microsoft Excel, very basic example. And you are an Excel wizard and you can really do Microsoft Excel well, offer that I'm happy to like meet you again, or like do a video call and show you some good ways in which I use Excel, and that could be useful for you, and make that offer of help from even your side. Because remember, all the positive interactions that you have, it's not just about one person getting the most, it's about both people trying to help each other do better. And that's the summary here. So that's how you do one coffee chat effectively. But how do you do 100? And I have a number of ideas here. If you can just go on to the next slide. Once you've figured out how to do one effectively, you have a number of ways in which you can do 100 effectively, but it's critical to figure out how to do one effectively, and then come the 100. So some ways in which you can do 100 very effectively. And I remember the first month I actively started reaching out to people. I met about like 5 people. I'd reach out to maybe like 60, 70 people. I did about 5. Next month, I adopted some of these ideas, and I used some of these habits. I built out some of these habits, and I met with about 15 people, and I'd only reached out to about 50 people. So as you can see, a lot of like improvement there. So have a short list of companies. I mentioned this before as well. Have a short list of 50 ideal companies who employ the kind of people that you, who have the kind of job descriptions that you want to do. So remember, know what you want to do. Have a short list of companies who employ people like that. Standardize an email message that you customize to every single person that you're sending it out to. I shared an example of a follow-up email before, but you need to have a first reach out email, or like LinkedIn message, or even a text message that you customize to every single new person you meet. Track your interactions. You can do it very simply in a notebook or in an Excel, or if you want to use like a CRM, you can use that as well. But make sure you're tracking all your interactions so you know when to follow up and who all have you been reaching out to. In every conversation, ask someone very important question. Ask that person if they would know anyone else who would be helpful for you to talk to. So this is essentially, you're having a coffee chat with someone, and the conversation has gone well, as reasonably well. Ask them, is there someone else you think I should be talking to, and who you think would be helpful with their ideas or with their experiences, and aim for those referrals. And at the same time, set a weekly, or if you want to really kick it up a notch, have a weekly or daily goal for the number of people you want to reach out to. Typically, I recommend, if you want to get like a job within a month, and again, take this with a pinch of salt. If you want to get a job within a month, once you're all set with how you want to do one coffee chat, I would reach out to at least 5 people every single day, and then take it from there, take those interactions from there. And that would be sort of like my goal. Those are some ideas about doing about 100. You might need to do 50, or you might need to do 500 to reach your goal of getting like your ideal job, or like the ideal referral for your job as you're getting settled in this new environment. And lastly, I would strongly recommend, if you can just go on to the next slide, I would strongly recommend to focus on having good interactions and positive interactions with everyone. It's okay if someone is not in a position to help you. It's okay if someone, it's completely okay if someone's having a bad day and hence they are not responding to your email or your message, or even they don't show up for a coffee chat. It's completely fine. Everyone has different realities. Everyone has a life that's going on. Everyone is living their own experience. So I strongly recommend to play the long game. Focus on having positive interactions. Focus on having those good interactions and high quality interactions, and focus on taking the ball from there. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So if not today, maybe tomorrow you can do something with them. And that's pretty much what I had in terms of agenda. And I do want to keep like time out for questions. If you can just go on to the next slide. And I think Sonia is going to help me on the questions here.
Anubhav, a great presentation again. Everyone, you can type your questions into the Q&A tab, and I'll start taking them because I see a lot of you have already posted some here. Okay. So you might have already answered this, but because I'm going to skip the one that you've already answered during the presentation. Do you need to be very formally dressed in coffee chats?
Great question. And like all great questions, the answer here is it depends. So it depends on what industry you're in. For example, I'm in technology, in the technology space, right? And we, in general, don't dress very formally. We will typically have a shirt and dark jeans and maybe like a sweater, or some people even dress less formally than that. So if I'm meeting someone from technology, and from the technology, especially from a startup space, I will not dress any more formally than that. However, if you're in the banking industry, and let's say you're an investment banker or you work in capital markets, folks there tend to be dressed very formally, even at work or however, even otherwise. So if you're meeting someone from that industry, and if you are from that industry or you want to get into that industry, you should be dressed very formally, right? The rule of thumb here is to dress for the job you want, not for the job that you have here. And you may have heard this before, but always dress for the kind of opportunity you are aspiring to. So if you're looking to work in a tech startup, don't show up wearing a suit typically. But if you are looking for a banking role, do dress up in a suit. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Is it necessary for the introduction to like kind of have something in common with that person that they're talking to? Because you mentioned, you know, like, oh, I work in supply chain, you work in supply chain as well. So do you have to have something in common with this person?
Yes, 100%. Otherwise, why will a stranger want to even reply to your message?
Exactly.
Think about it, right? If you get a random person who has nothing in common with you, why would you want to meet with them? And how I like to think about finding out a commonality when you're reaching out to a new person is think about this, answer this question: why them? Why them now? So if I'm a technology salesperson, why should I care about responding to you? And that's the only thing you know about me. Maybe you know about a technology that I don't know about, and you can say that in the message. Or you can say, if it's supply chains, say that you've done your research on the person, right? And this is where research is critical. You've done your research on the person or the company that they work at, and you know things that are common, maybe a shared experience that you have from the past, or maybe a technology that you know of, or maybe something that you read, or maybe an article that you thought might be interesting. Have that commonality right out there in the first message, because otherwise you will not get responses to your messages. So it is critical, yeah.
Thank you. And could you share some open-ended questions that you have asked before during the meeting?
Yeah, for sure. So if I'm meeting someone and we've gone through the introduction phase, so I know roughly about what they do, and before that I've shared like a 10-second pitch about myself, and they've shared a little bit about themselves. One favorite question that I have is if they specifically answer, like mention their company in their introduction, I will ask open-ended question, which is typical, which is, what do you like the most about working at company X? And this, again, like I said, it's a back and forth. So they've mentioned their company in their introduction just before this point, right? So I will ask them, what do you like the most? And that's an open-ended question that you could ask. That's just one example. You could ask maybe like if they mention like where they live, for example, in their introduction, you can ask, so what is the best thing about living in downtown Toronto? or whatever, Midtown or like Brampton or wherever they may be living, right? So these are, again, the structure of the question is very simple. It's open-ended. It can be answered in any way, and it just helps to like get the conversation going and flowing. And that's the core idea.
Thank you. And who pays for the coffee?
Always you should offer to pay, because you are the one who's initiated, who's requested for a coffee. You should always be paying. And you must, I will insist at least 3 times, but if they really are persistent, no, it's fine, let me pay, or like, however, like if they are like, no, we should split the check or something like that. If they insist, like typically I take it to be 3 times, you should have your own number here, but I will insist at least 3 times to pay, and then they still insist, then I will let them pay. But always first time you should pay for coffee. You should insist on paying, and just get the check. Like as soon as you order the coffee, just take it. Like don't wait, let the check just sit there or something like that. This creates unnecessary awkwardness.
Right, thank you. And okay, how do you convince someone to have a coffee chat with you?
Find something that is in common with you and that person. And that can be a bunch of things. Maybe you're from the same city, if like they are also new, or like they moved to the country from somewhere else. That could be one thing that could be common. Maybe you went to the same university, maybe they work in a similar function that you have in your home country. So find something in common, be very specific with what you need, and be also suggesting some good time to meet with. So for example, if I'm reaching out to another technology salesperson who's from my home city back in India, I'll say, hey, I've just moved to Toronto, Canada from New Delhi, India. Like you, I'm also a technology sales professional, and I've spent I have spent 10 years working with insurance companies and their technologies. I would love to take you out for coffee and maybe share some ideas and learn from your experience. Is Thursday 2 p.m. good for you, hypothetically? For a coffee, I'm happy to travel to close to where you are. That's how you ask. This is just one example.
And how do you identify a good place to have a coffee chat?
Standard in typically, if you want to identify a safe space and you don't want to like go very like experimental, Starbucks are safe. Tim Hortons are everywhere, and they tend to be safe. Look them up. Look up Starbucks or Tim Hortons closest to the area that you want to meet in, and those are safer, especially when you're beginning. As you spend time in Toronto or like wherever in Canada, wherever you might be, in Vancouver, wherever, you will get to know more and more good coffee places. Critical about the coffee place should be that it should be quiet. It should not be too noisy. And obviously there's a little bit of noise, that background noise that happens in a coffee shop, but it shouldn't be like you can't hear the other person. That's most critical. And it should be convenient for them to reach, not for you, for them to reach the person that you're proposing to, because that makes it easy to say yes, right, for that other person.
Okay, and next question I see is, how long should this coffee chat be?
Standard, ask for 30 minutes. 30 minutes is typical. Be mindful of time. So if you, and before that, make sure you're there at least 5 minutes before you're supposed to start. Have 30 minutes, account for about 30 minutes. And as you're approaching the end of 30 minutes, say that I know we had set about 30 minutes for this interaction, and we're just about ending there. We're just about reaching the end of 30 minutes. I hope that's okay with you. And if they have more time and the conversation is going well, obviously they'll say, no, we can talk more for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. Then you can take it more, but 30 minutes is typically standard.
Okay, thank you. And then, why would somebody agree to have a coffee chat with you?
Because, and I'll tell you my reason. Why will I agree to have a coffee chat with you? Because one, you've shared something that is in common and is of interest to me. Secondly, I feel that I can be of help. The biggest reason why someone will agree to have a coffee chat with you is because they want to help you, not because of anything else. And that's the biggest reason. Now they might just take it as an opportunity to meet someone new, or maybe just get a free coffee or whatever. That's a superficial reason, but deep down, I believe everyone is a nice person, is a good person deep down in their heart, and people genuinely want to help other people. You just have to make it easy to let them help you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You know what? This is all the time we have because we did go over. So Anubhav, thank you again for your time. I don't want to take too much of it because I know you were tight for schedule and you still took the time out to speak to our viewers today. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close up?
My LinkedIn is there. If you do make use of the ideas that I shared today, do reach out on LinkedIn. And remember, I'm evaluating and I'm seeing how much of what I shared today actually resonated. So if you'd like, I'm open to a coffee chat. Be very specific. Use the tips that I shared today, and we can do a coffee chat as well if you'd like, and if I can be of help to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And everyone, if you do have more questions about, networking, resumes, interviews, you can check out our website, click on ACCES, and you can look at some past webinars and other resources we have online. And our next webinar is on Monday, March 9th. It's called Tips for an Effective Interview. So for job interview tips, you can register just like you did for this one today. And if you are on your way to Canada, you've got your COPR and you're coming in the next few months, and you belong to any of these sectors here, you can email cmc@accessemployment.ca, that's access with one S, and they will be able to tell you if you're eligible for pre-arrival services as well. And again, thank you everyone, and thank you Anubhav. If you want to know what's happening at ACCES, whether it's online, in-house, off-site, we always post on our social media. So follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And again, thank you everyone for joining, and a very big thank you to you, Anubhav, for coming back for this presentation today.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day ahead.
Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye.